The young lord of the ducal house of Fellenberg was a man who had everything, a solid family background that could make even the most arrogant nobles jealous, a prestigious education at the Imperial Academy's magic department, and overflowing wealth that would make kings blush with envy. His name was Fernand Fellenberg, and he was known across the entire empire as the money fiend. His obsession with wealth wasn't just a simple hobby, it was a way of life, a burning passion that consumed his every waking moment. While other nobles spent their days chasing glory or romance, Fernand was busy running the merchant guild his family owned, holding morning meetings and receiving reports from his subordinates. And he was not a forgiving boss. If anyone failed to meet his expectations, he made sure they knew it. His sharp tongue and calculating eyes could make even the most experienced merchants tremble. It was just a day like any other, filled with the familiar rhythm of business and the satisfying clink of coins. But as they say, misfortune always strikes suddenly, and when it does, it never gives you any warning. Fernand was walking down a corridor with his assistant when something caught his eye. It was a sunny day without a single drop of rain in sight, yet when he looked up, he saw lightning hurtling straight toward him. Before he could react, the bolt struck him with devastating force. The shock was so great that it took his breath away, and his mind grew hazy as his body struggled to process what had just happened. And in that moment of weakness, a strange soul burrowed into his consciousness. Fernand's thoughts were flooded with confusion as he felt something foreign invading his mind. He demanded to know who they were. The invader laughed, asking if they were actually possessing someone. Fernand was bewildered, asking what they meant by possession. The strange soul began spouting incomprehensible words while rummaging through Fernand's memories and thoughts. His mind instinctively realized what was happening. This thing was trying to steal his body. With whatever mana he had left, he squeezed out every drop and attacked the invader with everything he had. The soul screamed as it was being attacked, but Fernand kept pressing forward until the invader scattered throughout his entire body. And in that moment, he was able to absorb some of it. Then came the memories. Unfamiliar memories slammed into his head with such force that it caused a splitting pain throughout his entire skull. It was like 1,000 years of someone else's life was being downloaded directly into his brain. He jolted awake, and his assistant rushed to his side, asking if he was okay. But Fernand couldn't respond. Not because he was in pain, but because there was something strange right in front of his eyes. A text that wasn't there before. It was a prophecy about the ominous end of this world, about how the 72 demon kings of Solomon would rise from their ancient slumber, about how the world would fall into chaos, and about how Fernand himself would conspire with a demon and lose all of his money. It was a hint of a future more terrible than death. Fernand started asking what kind of nonsense this was. There was no way he would ever live like a beggar. That was simply unacceptable. From that day forward, he tried to find out what that soul was and why it tried possessing him. He wanted to understand how it had all those strange memories that now haunted his thoughts. But no matter how hard he searched, he ended up finding nothing. One thing he was certain about, though, was that there was a high chance the prophecy was coming true. In fact, it wasn't just a chance. It had been coming true so far. Thanks to that, he was able to get ahead of issues and make a pretty hefty profit, but he wasn't entirely happy about it. The fact that the prophecy was coming true meant that his ruin was also drawing near. He needed to verify more thoroughly whether it was entirely correct. His assistant asked how class was, and Fernand said it was like usual. Then the assistant offered him some coffee, and Fernand agreed. As he reached for the newspaper, he looked for news about the academy. The assistant could tell he was acting strange, wondering if he was feeling unwell these days. Fernand said no, but the assistant pressed further, noting that it seemed like he had a lot on his mind. Fernand asked how long it had been like that. The assistant said about half a year ago. He'd suddenly space out for a while, and the person who used to prioritize investigation and verification would suddenly make strange choices as if possessed. These were clearly the after effects of being struck by lightning. Fernand said that those strange choices turned out to be the right ones in the end. Then he saw someone from the army and family named Ant who had applied to the school. Fernand's eyes widened, and he said that this confirmed it. He started running off, and when his assistant went to ask him a question, Fernand said he'd be back after a quick trip to the south. The assistant protested that he just made him coffee, but Fernand didn't care. The Imperial Academy was a vast domain built on Bardian, an island located in the Empire's inland sea. The expansive grounds were an artificial environment created by magic, and in the southern part, a wide wetland stretched out. Fernand said it was the day he could finally verify for sure if the prophecy was real. Among the contents mentioned in the prophecy, there were 3 things in his mind that stood out the most, and they were all about him falling into ruin and becoming a beggar. This pissed him off immensely. He listed them properly. First, the one just mentioned about him being a beggar. Second, was where the 72 demons summoned by Solomon 1,000 years ago rise again. And third was the future of a hero who would save the world by fighting against those demons. Fernand said that this hero was a figure that no citizen of the empire could possibly not know. He was a descendant of the empire's founding emperor, Kaino Armen. The House of Armen, which founded the entire empire along with the 5 surrounding kingdoms, was now, 1,000 years later, a fallen house that had lost all of its authority as the imperial family with only its honor remaining. The prophecy book stated that this descendant of the old imperial family, Ant, was the protagonist. After finishing the entrance exam, Ant did not return right away but headed for the southern wetlands. The reason he entered the academy was to chase the trail of a map left to his family by the first emperor. From the moment Ant enrolled in the academy, a series of events occurred around him, written in detail just like reading a novel. Seeing for himself if Ant was really acting according to the prophecy was the surest way to verify its authenticity. Besides that, Ant was also directly related to Fernand's awful future, as he would give him an excommunication document. What was even more crazy was that Fernand had no idea why Ant came to hate him, leading to his downfall. He couldn't read the entire contents of the prophecy book. There were parts that were unreadable here and there. So for some events, he could only grasp the general flow, and he couldn't figure out the exact cause and effect. The superficial reason was that he joined hands with a demon. But that did not make sense. Fernand got off his horse, saying that it should be around here somewhere. Ant was searching for a hidden dungeon in these wetlands. Inside the dungeon was a provision from the first emperor of the Armen family, a sword imbued with the spirit of the empire's first royal knight, Gardner Alvain Farson, lay dormant. Fernand said that if the prophecy was accurate, Ant was the most suitable person to save the world from demons, and he was sure going to be a great hero. If only he wasn't talented enough to fight demons, he would have found him and crushed him long ago, because this bastard planned to make him a beggar. Then he smelled blood in the air. The prophecy said that Ant was injured by a croaker's attack on the way to the dungeon. Even if he was born with the destiny of a hero, his talent hadn't blossomed yet. A croaker was an apex predator of the swamp, and it must have been a tough opponent. Fernand saw the blood leading to a tree, recognizing it as the cave entrance. So far, everything was just as the prophecy had said. He decided to check if Ant was inside, but then he spotted him off to his side. He wondered why Ant hadn't entered the dungeon yet, and if he had come too early. Fernand knew that in times like this, he needed to act confident. He told Ant that this was an area restricted for freshmen. Ant asked if he knew him, and Fernand said that there was nobody in the empire who didn't know him. Ant apologized but said he didn't recognize him, asking for his name. Fernand introduced himself, and Ant was surprised, recognizing the name. Fernand reminded him that he was his senior. Ant acknowledged this, and Fernand asked if he had run into a lizard man because he was injured. Fernand said that was pretty unlucky since they were only spotted once or twice a year, and threw him an elixir. He explained that it was a potion of the highest grade, and it would be much better than drinking 10 bottles of low-grade ones. Ant called him Young Lord, but Fernand corrected him, saying to just call him by his name. Ant did so, and Fernand said he didn't need money. Even if his family had fallen, he was of imperial blood, and Fernand doubted he would turn out to be a worthless person. They could just call it an investment. Ant said that Fernand didn't seem like someone who was crazy about money like the rumors said, and he might be a surprisingly good person. He thanked him, but Fernand thought to himself that he couldn't believe how much he was wasting, and if only it wasn't for the damn prophecy. He then started lecturing Ant about how lucky he was, and told him to be careful on his way back. Ant bowed, thanking him for his kindness. Fernand said that Ant didn't actually go back, but instead hid nearby, erasing his presence. Fernand thought that Ant was so clueless earlier, which was a different image from the one written in the prophecy, and he started to wonder if he could really entrust the future of the world to this kid. In the prophecy, Ant entered the dungeon while injured. On top of that, the shock from falling right at the dungeon entrance left his whole body a wreck. His wounds were severe, and he ended up drinking all of his potions, but they were so poor quality that he wasn't fully healed. Fernand noted that it was faint, but there was still a trace of magic left. The mark in the middle of the altar where the sword was embedded was still there, but Ant was no longer here, and the situation was just telling him that the prophecy was real, which meant that all of these things, such as his excommunication, meant that it was all real. Fernand scratched his head, saying he couldn't believe he was going to become a beggar, and while Ant was the main protagonist of the prophecy and also the hero who protected the world from demons, that was not all he was, as he was the one who would bring about Fernand's downfall. But right now, his stock was rising. The one described in the prophecy had an entirely different personality from the Ant he knew. He was the type who valued honor more than material things, so if he approached him carelessly, it might backfire. He wondered how to deal with this. He said it was a difficult problem, and his assistant asked what he meant. We finally learned that his assistant's name was Hyde. Fernand asked Hyde a hypothetical question. If there was a top stock that would definitely grow well and he invested in it, what would he do? Hyde said he'd do it without hesitating. Fernan then asked what if the stock had a shitty personality that wasn't aligned with his. Hyde asked why that was even a concern. The Duke always said that even personalities could be aligned with money. Fernan realized he was right. It was only complicated due to the demons and the destruction, but the core principle was the same. Invest, take a risk, and earn massive amounts of money. A difference in personality was a very minor issue in the face of massive wealth, but he needed more information on Ant. He grabbed his coat, saying that he needed to go meet him right now. Hyde asked who, since they had a guest coming later, but Fernan left. Hyde said that he was again just reading stuff about the prophecy once more. He guessed he knew. At the academy, dormitories were assigned according to entrance exam rankings. Rank 1 to 10 was the Levis dorm for the top elite. 11 to 30 was the Blessed dorm for outstanding students, and the dorm for the scraps outside the top 30 was called the Debs dorm. We saw Gardner, or at least his ego that now resided in the sword. He was yelling at Ant, asking how a descendant of the Armin was staying in the Debs dorm rather than one of the better ones when it was their family's academy. This was unbelievable. If the Emperor knew, he'd rise from his grave and twist all these demons and axes. Ant asked why he was talking about demons all of a sudden. Gardner said that there was no way something like this could happen without a demon interfering. Ant told him that it couldn't be helped. He was here because he was weak. Gardner said that there was no way a descendant of the Armenians was this weak. Ant said the first emperor was to blame. Gardner asked what he was talking about. Ant explained that the first emperor was the one who abolished the imperial succession system and changed it to electing the emperor from among the 7 electorates. Furthermore, he donated most of their land and assets to the empire, and as the throne was taken by the other elector families for over 100 years, the donated territory was no longer theirs, and their families' fortunes gradually declined, even losing some of the secret sword techniques passed through generations. Even though he was an elector, given these circumstances, he couldn't even receive proper sword training. Gardner said that he still had talent, and he would support him with all the resources he could to restore their family to its former glory. And perhaps the late emperor also predicted this and placed him here for that purpose. There was a knock at the door. We heard Fernan asking if he was there. Gardner wondered who it could be. Ant said he had no idea, asking who it was. Fernan told him, and Ant opened the door, asking what brought him here. Fernan asked if he was busy, and Ant said no. He didn't have anything urgent to do right now. Fernan said great, asking if he could spare a moment, but it was way too loud here as everybody was moving in and out, and there was a lot of yapping. He told him that they should go somewhere quieter. Ant told him to just wait 10 minutes and he'd come right out. Fernan asked if he was really making him wait for 10 whole minutes and started yapping at him, saying that he had no discipline. Ant corrected himself, saying that he'd get out in 5. Fernan told him he'd be waiting outside and closed the door. Ant said he wasn't going to be able to do that. Gardner asked who the hell that was. Ant told him that he was the eldest son of the Fellenberg family. Gardner said they were nothing but a bunch of rich kids, asking what made them so great when all they had was money and why they were bossing around a royal heir. Ant was just trying to figure out why Fernan wanted to see him, saying surely he didn't come to get the potion money since it was an investment. A little later, while they were having a meeting, Fernan noticed that Ant had brought his sword and asked about it. Ant said he felt safe carrying it, but he didn't have any ill intentions. Fernan said he understood most knights couldn't bear to stay away from their swords, and he knew that it must be the one infused with the gardener's ego. Ant asked why he wanted to meet him, and Fernan said it was nothing much. He was just thinking of dinner and told him to order whatever he wanted. Ant said he was fine since this place looked expensive. Fernan told him to stop refusing his senior when they were offering drinks. Ant agreed and said he'd look at the menu. As Ant started scouring through it, Fernan looked at him, thinking that he seemed naive and gentle, but he wondered how a kid like this changed so much in the future. He asked Ant what he was going to do after he graduated. Ant looked surprised, and Fernan said that students usually enrolled in the academy to expand their influence, but the Armin always used the excuse of developing their family strength and never participated in socializing. So it was surprising to discover someone from that family had enrolled now. Ant said he was sick of being scorned as a fallen imperial family, and their blood was still royal, even if it was just the name. That was the reason he would become a royal knight and restore his family's honor. Fernan said that his eyes changed when he was talking about his dream. He had high ambition and determination, strong enough to achieve his goals. He also had great pride in his lineage, meaning he wasn't just as naive as he thought. Fernan asked if he had any allergies. They then started having a little side conversation, which was surprisingly wholesome. But later in the day, Fernan said he'd got a good idea of what kind of person Ant was now. He was going to sponsor him after, but it was a good thing that he didn't, as he would have damaged his pride the moment he threw money in his face since he valued honor, just like he did in the prophecy. For someone like him, it was better to commit to a push and pull technique rather than blatant goodwill. His top priority was to slowly build trust and gain his loyalty loyalty, and the time when he would need him would come naturally if he just waited, and when it did, he'd reel him in like a fish, using his money against him. He'd turn him all over to his side and extract everything he needed. Hyde asked where he'd been, and if he also met with the Birchov. Fernand said no, but he was curious as to why Hyde was bringing up the Birchov so suddenly. Hyde reminded him that he had summoned Luina Birchov because she was slacking off. Fernand asked if that was the day, and Hyde said that he would have just sent her back if he had known he'd be so late. He ended up telling her that Fernand wouldn't be gone for long, but she left after 3 hours of waiting, and she was going to think he purposely did this to crush her determination. Fernand said it was fine. She would be easier to control if her determination was crushed, and he'd put a lot of effort into binding the Birchv, so it needed to work out. Hyde got a sharp pain in his head and started holding on to it. Hyde asked if he was okay, and Fernand said he didn't know what was going on, but his head hurt like crazy. He then spotted the prophecy starting to show some of the unreadable parts from before, and he wondered why it was appearing now. It described a woman with fluttering brown hair and eyes reminiscent of aquamarine blue. There were only parts of what described her. Her sword was incomparably noble and beautiful, as if it was alive, and she danced under the moonlight. Ant ran into her and found himself captivated. Her outstanding talent was enough to rival a royal knight. However, she had malevolence within her. If the shackles binding her were broken, she would be able to spread her wings once more and soar to the potential she had. The shackles binding her, though, were none other than the Fellenberg family, and Ant needed to free her from them. Fernand said no way, wondering if this was why Ant hated him in the future, all because of Luina. He said things got a lot more complicated.